evening, dear Medyascope viewers. Welcome to This Week in Turkey. This evening, our guest will be Professor Ali Çarkoğlu, joining us to speak about the developments in domestic politics this week. But first, let's take a look at the developments. On March 17th, People's Democratic Party Member of Parliament for Kocaeli, Ömer Gergerlioğlu, was stripped of his MP status due to a social media post he shared in 2016. Denouncements of this court ruling came both from domestic and international grounds, calling the decision unconstitutional. Gergerlioğlu has been spending the night on a couch in the HDP offices in Parliament as a continuation of his resistance. He says he will continue to stay until the Constitutional Court makes a decision.
Sunulan kesinleşmiş mahkeme kararı doğrultusunda Kocaeli Milletvekili Ömer Faruk Gergerlioğlu'nun milletvekilliği düşmüştür.
HDP MP Ömer Faruk Gergerlioğlu was stripped from his MP status after the final court ruling was announced at the plenary session of the Turkish parliament on March 17. Gergerlioğlu said that he does not recognize this decision and staged a sit-in protest at the parliament's General Assembly with other HDP deputies. Speaking to Medyascope from the protest at the parliament, Gergerlioğlu stated the following: "Right now, sessions are on hold. They cannot start because we are protesting. The party deputies are also unsure of what to do. Republican People's Party is giving their support to us. Nationalist Movement Party and E Party have been silent so far. We are strong. We are going to win this case. I would not get myself into this for no reason. We are aware of our power and support, and we will win this fight." HDP MP was sentenced to 2 years and 6 months in prison for propagandizing for a terrorist organization on February 21 of 2018 by the Kocaeli Second Heavy Penal Court. This was on the grounds of a news story he retweeted on Twitter in 2016 about the Kurdish conflict. Gergerlioğlu's prison sentence from 2018 was recently upheld by the Court of Cassation on February 19, 2021. On March 5th, Gergerlioğlu applied to the Constitutional Court under the complaint of violation of his freedom of speech and the right to engage in political action, but there was no response. Gergerlioğlu's prison sentence was ruled before he became a member of the parliament. According to the Turkish Constitution's 83rd clause, if a deputy committed an offense before becoming an MP, the file must be suspended and wait until the end of their term. However, the 14th clause states that if the offense is under aiming to violate the indivisible integrity of the state, the investigation proceeds. Regarding the question of the legitimacy of Gergerlioğlu's court ruling, journalist Taha Akyol said the following to Medyascope viewers: "Mr. Gergerlioğlu's situation has been incorporated into the 14th clause. The issue here is that the fact that Gergerlioğlu had retweeted a news story published by T24 does not count as terrorist organization propaganda. When we look at the former decisions of the Constitutional Court, the European Court of Human Rights, and even the 16th Penal Court that has approved this ruling, Gergerlioğlu's tweet cannot be seen as a crime, because, according to the decisions of the 16th Penal Court, to share or to spread the political views of a terrorist organization is not counted as propagandizing terrorist organization. What counts as propaganda is to defend and to promote their violent acts and methods, as it is stated in the 6th and 7th clauses of the anti-terror law." Domestic and international reactions to the decision to expel Gergerlioğlu from the parliament condemned Turkey's government for another crackdown. Turkey's main opposition, Republican People's Party Istanbul provincial leader Canan Kaftancıoğlu, tweeted that the removal of yet one more HDP lawmaker was in violation of the constitution. On March 17th, European Parliament Standing Rapporteur of Turkey, Nacho Sanchez Amor, and the chair of the delegation to the EU-Turkey Joint Parliamentary Committee, Sergey Lagodinsky, released a joint statement. The statement read: "Gergerlioğlu's expulsion from parliament and his upcoming jailing only 2 weeks after the Turkish president presented a new human rights action plan that pledged to put human dignity, human rights, and the rule of law at its center is a painful reality check. Actions speak louder than words, and in this case, they speak particularly louder than any promise of legal reforms and any speech towards the EU full of good intentions." On the same day, the Human Rights Watch also issued a written statement urging the government to not expel Gergerlioğlu from the parliament. Any move by Turkey's parliament to use an opposition politician's wrongful conviction for a social media post as a pretext to strip him of his parliamentary seat and jail him would compound the serious violation of his right to freedom of expression and violate the voters' right to choose their representatives, the Human Rights Watch stated. In accordance, The US Department of State also condemned the decision through a written statement. The spokesperson for the US Department of State, Ned Price, stated that the United States is closely following events in Turkey, including troubling moves on March 17 to strip MP Ömer Faruk Gergerlioğlu of his parliamentary seat. We call on the government of Turkey to respect freedom of expression in line with protections in the Turkish constitution and with Turkey's international obligations. These developments are the latest signs of government's pressure on the HDP, whose members face many charges over alleged ties to the outlawed Kurdistan Workers' Party. Various HDP leaders have been imprisoned since 2016. Apart from being a politician, Gergerlioğlu is a notable human rights advocate and a medical doctor. Since he was elected to parliament in 2018, he has shed light to human rights infringements in Turkey. Recently, he raised awareness over the use of strip searches by police forces and participated in the Boğaziçi University protests against the government-appointed rector Melih Bulu.
On March 17, the same day as Gergerlioğlu was stripped from his MP status, Chief Public Prosecutor of the Court of Cassation Bekir Şahin filed a case for the closure of the People's Democratic Party at the Constitutional Court. Criticism has quickly ensued as the move was deemed undemocratic. As part of the crackdown on the HDP, Human Rights Association co-chair Öztürk Türkdoğan, as well as several HDP executives, have been taken into custody in house raids carried out in the early hours of the morning.
Chief Public Prosecutor of the Court of Cassation, Bekir Şahin, submitted a written statement to the Constitutional Court. In the statement, Şahin stated that the HDP was acting together with the terrorist organization Kurdistan Workers' Party and affiliated organizations, and that such activity threatened to destroy the inseparability between the state and the people. In this indictment prepared by Bekir Şahin, there is also a request to impose political bans on 697 HDP lawmakers. If the Constitutional Court upholds the indictments and the HDP gets closed down, the party members cannot become a member, founder, inspector, or executive for another political party for 5 years. HDP lawmakers said that the case was a heavy blow to democracy and law and called for their supporters to resist. HDP co-chair Mithat Sancar said that, although it seems that this operation is against the HDP is not the single target. It is to bring down the struggle for democracy in Turkey, to abolish democratic politics. It's to institutionalize fascism and establish it completely. The main opposition, Republican People's Party chair Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, spoke against the lawsuit filed for the closure of HDP. Speaking in the city of Tekirdağ on March 18th, Kılıçdaroğlu said that, if we are defending democracy, we have to abandon a process such as the closure of political parties and the dissolution of political parties. Political parties are indispensable elements of democracy. Deva Party chair Ali Babacan also criticized the HDP lawsuit in a tweet he shared on March 17th. Political legitimacy is ensured by the support of society. Trying to hinder a party that has received 6 million votes through the judiciary is a disrespect for our nation. Our democracy can only improve in an environment where different opinions are discussed. Future Party chair Ahmet Davutoğlu has also condemned the issue through Twitter and stated the following: closing political parties and depriving the elected MPs of their rights will not open the way for Turkey. It undermines social peace. Those who set targets for the year 2053, those who talk about the Constitution, want to push Turkey into the turbulence of the 1990s. We will defend democracy and politics to the end. Opposition's E-Party did not comment on the request for closure. In the past, several of HDP's predecessor parties were closed down due to the alleged links to the PKK, but were re-established under different names. HDP has also been under growing political and legal pressure from the Turkish government. Due to the government's crackdown on HDP, dozens of HDP lawmakers have been behind bars since 2016, including the former co-chairs Selahattin Demirtaş and Figen Yüksekdağ. 45 of the 65 HDP mayors elected in the 2019 elections have been dismissed by the Interior Ministry, being accused of having links to terror organizations. Currently, more than 100 HDP members are facing jail sentences concerning the 2014 Kobane protest incidents. Also, 25 HDP MPs face losing their immunities over cases filed against them. There has been international criticism regarding the HDP's case for closure as well. The US Department of State condemned the request for the HDP's closure with a statement that read, We're also monitoring the initiation of efforts to dissolve the People's Democratic Party, a decision that would unduly subvert the will of Turkish voters, further undermine democracy in Turkey, and deny millions of Turkish citizens their chosen representation. The European Parliament's rapporteur on Turkey, Nacho Sanchez Amor, also criticized the move through stating, unapologetically moving towards the end of pluralism. What reaction does Turkey expect now from the European Union? A positive agenda? As a response to the international condemnations, the Turkey's foreign ministry released a written statement replying to the criticisms of the United States and the European Union. Everyone must wait for the ruling the Constitutional Court will make in this process. Commenting on an ongoing judicial process amounts to intervention in the judiciary, Turkey's foreign ministry said.
This evening, our guest is Professor Ali Çarkoğlu, faculty member at the International Relations Department at Koç University, Istanbul.
Hello, Professor Çarkoğlu. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
So Wednesday, Ömer Faruk Gergerlioğlu was stripped of his MP status because of a social media post. And on the same day, we have a Turkish state prosecutor who filed a case with the Constitutional Court for the closure of the People's Democratic Party and a political ban on almost 700 politicians from the party as well. And this is just as a quick reminder to our audiences, the HDP is the third largest party in the parliament, and it is a party that has received some 6 million votes and has been under immense pressure and prosecution by the ruling AKP-MHP for some time now. And all of this is also happening 2 weeks after Erdogan declared the Human Rights Action Plan. So, Professor Çarkoğlu, what do these developments tell us about the political atmosphere in Turkey at the moment?
Well, it looks like the Erdogan government is using everything in its power to reshape the agenda so that the nationalist sensitivities are brought forward, and the actual economic and pandemic related public health issues are not discussed. And effectively, they are very successful in doing so. We don't discuss, as of today, the number of people diagnosed with the pandemic virus, which is rising continuously for the last 2 weeks. We're losing 80 plus people on a daily basis, and that's also on the rise. And the economic conditions of the working masses are not at all satisfactory. And what are we discussing? We are discussing the decision of a court to ban the morning student. What do you call that? The daily recitation of commitment to the Turkish state and Turkishness. So this was an issue that was not surprisingly brought to the agenda and is now one of the major debates in Turkish politics, whether or not the cancellation of this ceremony on a daily basis is acceptable for the MHP. MHP being the Nationalist Action Party, which receives anywhere between 7 to 8% of the vote. So on its own, it cannot possibly go above 10%. So all arrangements are made to make sure that its support is actually behind the ruling AK Party. And disproportionately, the nationalist agenda is shaping the debate nowadays in Turkey. Very convenient, as I said. Otherwise, I would think AK Party would not have followed most of these recent policies, but they have to because they need the backing of the nationalists.
Professor, yes, as you mentioned, it was really the MHP who has been bringing up this issue of closure of the HDP for quite some time now. And many have said that it was, again, Bahçeli's desire, and he won, convincing Erdogan for the request. Whether the AKP actually needs the MHP support as well. And I don't want to speculate here, but the case for the closure of HDP was filed a day before MHP's General Assembly, where Bahçeli was once again selected as the chair of the party. So some have suggested
there was no other candidate. So.
Yes, so this was kind of
this is precisely the Turkish politics.
Yeah,
you run as the single candidate and get elected with the totality of representatives.
Yeah. So, Professor, could you perhaps detail a little bit more the relationship between the AKP and MHP alliance, and how kind of the closure of the HDP comes into that?
Well, this goes all the way back to the 2015 elections, which was a turning point in recent Turkish politics, because the AK Party then lost 10% of its support and fell to about 40% of the vote, which is still quite a sizable level of support, but it wasn't enough to control the Turkish Grand National Assembly, which necessitated the forming of some sort of a coalition. But that was almost impossible, given the fact that it depended on the support of the Kurdish HDP, which in that election received approximately 13.5% of the vote and became the third largest party in the country. MHP received approximately the same level of support, but a little bit below, I believe. And it was impossible for the nationalist agenda to form any kind of coalition with the Kurdish contingent in the parliament. Therefore, that actually signaled Erdogan that there is an opportunity here to go for a snap early election, which was again completely opposite to all the claims AK Party made that there will be no early elections, no coalitions of any sort. But effectively, we had another election following the June 2015 in November, and in between, Turkey was under constant terror-related attacks by all different sources, from PKK to IŞİD, the Islamic State, and hundreds of lives were lost in the campaign due to these attacks, which pushed the agenda towards a nationalist sentiment, which helped Erdogan regain its losses and recover with around 48–49% of the vote. So it was a very turbulent year, which showed us that the AK Party can lose elections, but an alliance with the nationalists will make sure that they can remain in power. Mm-hmm. At the time, we had Ahmet Davutoğlu as the prime minister. So he effectively won the November elections and at that time it was argued that keeping Erdogan a little bit at the sidelines would actually help the party, because he actually quite polarized the electorate for the June election, and the 10% loss was attributed to his prominent role in the campaign as the president. it was a new role, and legally it was on the shaky ground, but he didn't mind, and he campaigned for his party, and the party lost first and then regained. But that actually showed the AK Party that this is the strategy for the future. And ever since, MHP's support remains very strongly behind the AKP. Why does MHP adopt such a strategy? Because they fear that otherwise Erdogan will have to appeal to the Kurdish demands, continue the Kurdish opening process, which actually was in effect up until February of 2015. So anything and everything that AK Party did up to November basically failed from the perspective of the Kurdish problem in Turkey, and they changed the course of their policy. Now the MHP gains from this alliance what they always wanted, complete rejection of the issue on the agenda, and a strictly nationalist line of policy towards the Kurds in the region and within the country. So it's a mutually beneficial alliance. But of course, in between, we had a failed coup attempt, a constitutional referendum, and another election in 2018, which actually brought the effective lifting of the 10% threshold for representation in the parliament, because anyone who joins an alliance can actually get their MPs elected to the parliament, no matter what level of support they have. So we have MPs from E Party, for instance, the Good Party, which did not pass the 10% threshold, but since they have an electoral alliance with the CHP, the Republican People's Party, they also have a sizable contingent in the parliament. So what do we have now? We have only one party, which is HDP, bound and constrained by the 10% electoral threshold, but they apparently remain, I say apparently because this is, again, a hotly debated issue as to whether their electoral support base will remain where it is or where it was. Comfortably above 10% is the key issue here. And they seem to maintain that level of support in all the research from the polling institutes that I see, show HDP still being the third largest party. But there is an expectation that this closure case will paralyze the party on the ground and effectively make them completely non-competitive in the region and the country at large. So that's the expectation. My hunch is that this is not necessarily lead to the closure, but actually what matters is that HDP is paralyzed and it cannot bring together a high enough level of electoral support that can threaten the AK Party MHP government. And that's what matters now, nothing else. Closure case is now started to be debated in the country, and some experts claim that this file 600 odd pages long, is not necessarily very solid on legal grounds. And there might be a vote that might punish the party, but not necessarily close it, which exactly what happened in 2008 closure case against the AK Party itself, which was found guilty for the charges at the time, but not necessarily closed down. So that was the legal novelty that the Constitutional Court came up with at the time. The same can be actually pursued here, because it would very conveniently allow the AK Party to make the claim that, well, the process has worked, the party was not closed, but they cannot possibly run an effective election campaign, and that's all that matters for the AK Party and the MHP. Plus, the agenda will be bombarded with the nationalist discourse, leaving everything else aside. So very convenient.
Well, regardless of whether the HDP is shut down or not, I think this time around, what is different from previous closure requests of political parties, whether it's a Kurdish one or an Islamist one, which have occurred in the past, is this political ban on the politicians themselves. So effectively, kind of anyone who's including people who are not MPs for the HDP anymore.
Yeah.
So in that sense, how do you foresee the electoral base of the HDP voting, also perhaps in line of the way in which the opposition at this particular moment is supporting and condemning both the closure request as well as the stripping of the MP status of Gergerlioğlu?
Well, the ban on people might be actually the weakest point of the whole legal case, because apparently there are people who are no longer MPs, and linked, their official links to the party is not very clear. But these calls for ban on different personalities have always existed in these closure cases. 70 odd number of them were asked from the AK Party in 2008. I would think this is important, but not all of them might be actually banned from politics. What's important is to keep the leadership away from politics. Why do they need this? I really honestly do not understand, beyond the legal sensitivity. And I think we ought to take this seriously. A party having direct links to a terror organization is intolerable in any democracy. I mean, we have to make this argument to clarify our position. But the party's leader, Demirtas, is effectively in jail for the longest period. So why do you still need to ban him from politics? Well, because he actually participated in the presidential election and campaigned from within the prison. So this doesn't look good for any democracy, but for one reason or another, that is, I'm not a legal expert, and it's a mystery to me how these decisions can be still maintained, but he is effectively pacified. Why do you need a ban in addition to his imprisonment? We'll see. That's the objective they are pursuing now.
And Professor, how do you evaluate kind of the position of the opposition in relation to what has been happening for the past 2 days? I mean, many have, obviously condemned the decision, calling it, unlawful and so forth. But others, for example, have criticized the opposition for not doing enough, and hence, their arguments relating to this strengthened parliamentary system as being insincere. So what can and should the opposition do in relation to this kind of relentless prosecution of the HDP and its politicians?
You have to be realistic in these judgments. The issue of terror attacks costing dozens of lives day in, day out is politically very sensitive. And effectively, HDP is linked directly to all of these losses. In the eyes of a large mass public, they are now responsible. You may claim that they don't have enough opportunity to defend themselves and make their case, but that doesn't change the reality that in the eyes of the mass public, they are being held responsible. And this case is unfortunately a very difficult case to decide on a strictly legal basis because of these sensitivities. Why? You can actually count. I forgot how many soldiers were killed in just a couple of weeks ago. And okay, there were allegations of wrong military operation being conducted that was actually partially responsible for the lives. But that doesn't change the fact that the public sees this strictly as the responsibility of the PKK, which is linked to HDP, and HDP is not very effective in distancing itself from these claims. For one reason or another, they are paying a price for this failure to distance themselves from the PKK organization. And that is honestly a costly mistake, and that HDP is going to pay for their decision, basically.
And so in that sense, the support of the opposition in relation to everything that's going on right now is, do you think, to the point? What should the political strategy be after this point?
Well, opposition cannot raise its voice when, nearly 80% of the people agree with the claims of the government.
I understand.
It will be very costly for them as well, because then they will be blamed for giving support to PKK. So this is a very tough decision that they have to make. They actually were very successful in keeping some kind of informal coalition with the HDP for the local elections in 2019. And they have been constantly bombarded for maintaining this close relationship with the HDP, especially in Istanbul. And this actually is pressuring the alliance members, not only the Republican People's Party, but also the E Party, the Good Party, which has a strong contingent of nationalist MPs originally from MHP. So they were actually, they left MHP contingent to form a new party, but they still maintain their ideological commitment to nationalist positions. and for them, maintaining a formal or an informal alliance with HDP is unthinkable. That's the reality of Turkey. So wishful thinking is one thing, but reality is another thing. So you might wish that they collaborated and protected the entity of the party as an independent player in the resolution of the Kurdish conflict, but that's not going to happen unless they distance themselves in the eyes of the public, not only in the eyes of the elites and the journalists, but in the eyes of the public. They need to move to make sure that they are not the representatives of the fighters. It's a very sensitive issue how you define the PKK.
Yeah.
So in the mountains, let's say, so they should prove that this is not a credible claim. Otherwise, the mass public will be always on the side of the nationalists, and the opposition will be very reluctant to come forward in their support.
Professor Ali Çarkoğlu, thank you so much for having joined us today.
Thank you.
During his latest court hearing on March 16th, former People's Democratic Party co-chair Selahattin Demirtaş slammed the judges overseeing his case, saying they were committing a crime by not complying with the European Court of Human Rights' ruling on him.
Demirtaş addressed the Ankara 19th Heavy Penal Court via the video conferencing system Segbis on March 16th, where he said that the judges were implementing the orders of President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan, Nationalist Movement Party Chair Devlet Bahçeli, and Interior Minister Süleyman Soylu. You are explicitly running a political activity for the parties which you support so that they come to power. You have helped the system change. You lent assistance for the establishment of a one-man dictatorship. You are saying, we are not recognizing and paying attention to the Constitution and the ECHR. Thus, I congratulate you. I congratulate you on your obvious violation. You need to be congratulated because you have added extremely grave violations of rights to Turkey. Demirtaş further added, do not sacrifice yourself for the rulership. With a 99% probability, the government will change in this upcoming election in 2023. You will be summoned to the Judiciary Commission to be formed in Parliament. The next Parliament will ask you about the case files on us. The ECHR in December 2020 ruled that Turkey must immediately release Demirtaş, who has been imprisoned on several charges related to the Kurdistan Workers' Party since November 4, 2016. The Grand Chamber of the ECHR said the justification for Demirtaş's imprisonment was a cover for limiting pluralism and debate, and the renowned Kurdish politician had his rights violated under 5 different categories, including freedom of expression and liberty. The court postponed the hearing to April 14.
Some developments relating to the Boğaziçi University protests as well this week. On March 17th, 7 students appeared for the first time before judges as part of a case in which they are accused of inciting hatred and insulting religious values over a poster depicting Islam's sacred site Kabe with LGBTQI flags. 2 of the 7 students who were under arrest were released.
The hearing with regards to the case took place at the Istanbul 21st Criminal Court of First Instance at the Çağlayan Courthouse. During the hearing, the students made their defense statements, saying they refused the charges as their protest had nothing to do with either inciting hatred or insulting religious values. Of the 7 students on trial, 2 are arrested and 1 is under house arrest. The court ordered the release of 2 arrested students while postponing the trial to July 5. Students, academics, and alumni of Boğaziçi University were in front of the Çağlayan Courthouse in support of the students. A press release read by Boğaziçi academic Professor Zeynep Gambetti said that Boğaziçi academics stand against the targeting of students as criminals and suspects. Criticism and holding protests are rights. We do not accept the accusations against our students who have used these rights. We demand that our students are immediately released and they start their new academic year without losing any more time tomorrow, the press release said. The poster, for which the students were in court, was part of an exhibition that displayed several other artworks in protest of President Erdogan's appointment of a new rector to the university. The Kaaba in Mecca is the holiest site in Islam, with believers across the world praying in its direction. On January 29th, the students were detained after being targeted by government officials. On the same day, the police raided a room used by the university's LGBTI student club and confiscated flags and books. 2 days later, Melih Bulu, the new rector, shut down the LGBTI club.
On March 17th, the Istanbul 21st Heavy Penal Court sentenced police officer Cengiz Yıldız to 16 years and 8 months in prison for murdering Festus Okay in 2007. Lawyers demand that not only Yıldız, but also other police officers who were on duty at the Beyoğlu police station at the time of Okay's death also stand trial, as there was also negligence on their part.
Festus Okay, a Nigerian immigrant who had been living in Istanbul to become a football player, was shot dead by the police at Beyoğlu District Police Department on August 20, 2007. A lawsuit was filed against Cengiz Yıldız, the officer who shot Festus Okay. However, Yıldız was also not suspended from duty and continued to get full salary. The shirt that Okay was wearing when the shooting took place, which was an important evidence to determine the angle and distance of the gunshot, disappeared. Cengiz Yıldız was sentenced to 4 years and 2 months in prison for causing death by negligence, but the decision was later reversed. In January, the Constitutional Court had ruled that Okay's right to life had been violated and ordered the state to pay his family 80,000 liras in compensation. On March 17th, it was ruled that Yıldız shall be sentenced to 16 years and 8 months in prison for deliberate killing. Lawyers are demanding that not only Yıldız, but also other police officers who were on duty at the Beyoğlu police station at the time of Okay's death stand trial, as there was also negligence on their parts.
And finally, let's take a look at the latest COVID-19 numbers. According to the data released by the Ministry of Health, the daily number of new cases on March 18 has been announced as 20,049, and the number of deaths as 81. These numbers have led to the total number of cases to reach 2,950,603 and the death toll to become 29,777. Minister of Health Fahrettin Koca announced this week that 4.5 million doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine will arrive in the country this month. Koca also said that the first 5,800 doses of the vaccine, which will be used for tests, have arrived in Turkey. Koca further added that as of next week, vaccination of those aged between 60 to 65 will start. That's all from This Week in Turkey. See you next Friday at 9 p.m. Good night.